Hi, I'm Tim Altman from 13th Beach Health Services. I'm a naturopath, a nutritionist, respiratory therapist, breathing coach, and a mickle therapist. And I'm going to talk today a little bit more about my services. I introduced myself in a previous video, and today I'll talk about a little bit more about what I do, because the words I use to describe don't go into specifics. So you'll get to understand a little bit more about what it is that a naturopath or nutritionist does, or the work I do with breathing and mickle therapy. So what underlies all of my work is basically looking at, I'm very, very influenced by evolutionary medicine, genetics, and anthropology. And those approaches look at how we're built to live and compare that to how we actually live now. What we understand from research is that evolution takes tens of thousands of years for changes to be assimilated by our bodies. Some researchers suggested that it takes 40 to 100,000 years for a change in our environment to be assimilated by our bodies. So what that basically means, and this is me quoting one of the top genetics professors in Australia, is that our body still thinks we're wandering the bush, or that we're living like we did as hunter-gatherers some 40,000 years ago. So if you look at how we live now compared to how we would have lived as hunter-gatherers in tribes, you can see it's vastly different. And that has a huge impact on our health and our performance. So what we do is with that approach, we look at the aspects of living that affect our health and our performance. So that would be how we eat and drink, and I certainly look at that, how we rest and rejuvenate, how we sleep, how we process stress, how we breathe, which is a huge factor that's highly, highly underestimated, and also how we move and stabilize, which is not something that I work on specifically, but certainly other practitioners at 13th Beach Health Services do that perfectly. So we look at those areas of living and think, well, how do they compare to how we would have performed those functions when we were wandering the bush some 40,000 years ago or so? And how do we do that now? And so the understanding of how we're built to function will then help us optimize those aspects of living and therefore optimize our health. And when you look at health and wellness today, 90% of deaths now, or 90% of the illnesses we suffer from and die from in the modern world, are chronic illnesses. And almost all of the chronic illnesses are preventable by lifestyle intervention. What we also are finding now is that a lot of them are also treatable that way. You don't have to rely on palliative care or pharmaceuticals to treat chronic illnesses. Sure, they can help in some cases to deal with some symptoms, but we have to look at the root cause at a higher level. And that's what I do when working with chronic illnesses. So with the nutrition, and obviously with all of those aspects of living, we basically, when I sit down with a client, I ask lots of questions as to how they eat and drink. I have technology where I use biofeedback technology to measure how people breathe, but we can also tell that in your day-to-day functioning from some symptoms, how you sleep. I watch the client as they're listening to me, and I'll be able to tell a lot about their breathing straight away. And we also can we ask a lot about sleep, about all sorts of functions, and we get a great idea as to it. And then that approach then comes into how we approach health and optimal health, performance, wellness. It was that approach that allowed me to recover from chronic fatigue syndrome, and then I've explored optimal living since. And I've also applied some of the techniques I've learned with my professional work to performance with my paddling and with other athletes in paddling or other sports, or with corporates wanting to perform better in their job. We've done a lot of work with performance, whether it be how they breathe, how they eat and drink, how they process stress, or all of them combined, and it makes a huge difference. If the same processes that make us crook are also the same processes that limit our performance, so it can make a huge difference there. So that's a basic summary of the approach that I take. The nutrition work, I don't probably need to go into that too much, because most people understand it, but one of the main things I do with the biggest difference with nutrition is that the presence of carbohydrate in our food chain has gone up dramatically. And so we eat far more too much carbohydrate, too much processed foods, too many stimulants, etc. So there are big differences there. With our breathing, look, I'm going to go a lot more into that in separate videos, but with our breathing, what most people don't realize is that the average person breathes nowhere near functionally. We probably breathe 50 to 75% of our ultimate potential. So most people breathe using their chest and shoulders instead of their diaphragm, and they often use their mouth instead of their nose. And so that has a huge impact on our health that most people don't realize. And the work I do with Mikkel is completely different. That looks at how we process stress at a much higher level, at the level of the hypothalamus in the brain. And most people don't process, or where most of us live in constant low-level fight or flight functioning, and that's not how we're built to live. And that has a massive impact metabolically on our bodies and on our health, our performance. And so what we aim to do is to address that at the level of the hypothalamus with the Mikkel work, and it has a huge impact on our health, not only with chronic illnesses, but general living. If you'd like to explore more about my services and how I approach natural medicine, then you can find it on the 13th Beach Health Services website, www.13thbeachhealthservices.com.au, or my personal website, www.timaltman.com.au. Thank you.